Hello. I'm from CIJ. My name is Ibrahim Mohamoud, and my colleague Kerry Bullivant will be co-hosting this presentation, so to speak. We're from the advocacy group CIJ, which campaigns against state abuses in the war on terror and calls for the rule of law and due process. And our presentation is taking a slight tangent, a slight diversion, you could say. And I think one of the best contributions that we could bring is actually to speak about something very recent we've been working on, well, for a long time now, but becoming a lot more prevalent in our context in the UK. There you have some, it might be the most bizarre slide you've seen in your life, but that is a typical industrial town in the UK. They're not always red, they have different colors as well. It's a series of terraced houses, one next to another, for as far as I can see. And for those of you who might have young children, you might have a 10-year-old boy or a girl who's asked to draw about their house, to draw about their mum, their dad, their parents. And that's something that's very ordinary. But being a Muslim in the UK, it's a lot more different if you get your spelling mistakes wrong. So there you have it. So the young man is trying to express himself as saying, I live in a terrace house, but due to bad spelling, and in my opinion, the Conservative government's really bad education policies, you have a young man saying, terrace house. And therein lies a problem. Something that we would have seen on the internet as a meme, something you share around, and this is hilarious. In reality, you have a 10-year-old boy who's been traumatized by the idea of counterterrorism police coming to his house, spending several hours interrogating the mother and the father, and finding out who was the source of the radicalization. Why is a 10-year-old Muslim boy in northern England talking about living in a terrorist house? You must be terrorists. And that's the hysteria that many Muslims unfortunately face in the UK. And again, it's something that's genuinely unbelievable. It's hard to fathom that could be the case, but it's something that's very prevalent. And you may be thinking, and again, even the father, when asked about it, said, this is a joke. It must be a joke. I mean, how could he come to my house with several counterterrorism officers, the local authority, the school safeguarding officer, and all say that I'm the cause of radicalization for my son because he spelt terrace house instead of terrorist house. And therein lies a problem with this particular strategy. So the PREVENT strategy is a means of the government to essentially criminalize sport, very simply, as well. And what you're seeing is that the Muslim community is becoming a guinea pig community, a suspect community. So PREVENT is basically a policy that's been around for 9, 10 years now. It's aimed to stop the ideological threat of terrorism, to challenge the ideological threat of terrorism, to fight that and to challenge it. And the problem you have is that the government has passed legislation very recently, for the last year or so, to actually train every single public sector worker in the country to spot the signs of radicalization. And what they consider as training is a 2-hour video with very little Q&A, very little input. There's a manual. The trainer says, look, I'm going to read this manual, watch a video, and then you're trained. And if you see something, you just need to let us know. And that's the problem you have. A topic that's very complicated, political violence, why it happens, why do people commit acts of violence, it's all been packaged into a 2-hour takeaway and says, go away and learn how to spot terrorists and come back to us. And that's irrational. What you're seeing is the referral rate is shockingly high. PREVENT's been around since 2007. And it's been steadily increasing. But when the legal duty went up in 2015, look at the increase. And that's what happens when you make a legal duty. Beforehand, it was a policy, communities boycott it, they avoid it, they say it's a joke, it's racist, Islamophobic, we don't engage in this, it's a pseudoscience, right? But that's what happens when you legally oblige somebody to actually take part in a hocus-pocus government program. And again, I mean, this young man, I met him very recently. He came to our offices, he said, look, I'm having some trouble here, I'm a master's student, studying terrorism, and for some reason, because of the book that I was issued on my reading list, I was accused of being a terrorist, and I need some assistance because I'm being referred onto this PREVENT program, because I'm a so-called radical or an extremist. And again, people just could not believe it. But these horror stories are just, in the UK, I mean, even today, you had a story that just came out in the BBC regarding a 4-year-old boy who's drawing a picture of a cucumber and pronounced it as cookabomb because he's 4. And again, he's referring to prevent because the parents could be the source of radicalization. Why is a 4-year-old Muslim boy saying cook a bomb? Why is he not saying cucumber? And all the rest of it. And again, it's laughable, but it's the trauma that you're finding in these young people, and also adults as well, who all face this sort of thing. And the irony is, whenever we speak about the prevent strategy, you'll always have the naysayers and saying you're scaring people, you support terrorists, you're terrorist apologists, you are advocating the terrorist cause. And the problem is that we are seeing evidence, and a steady rise of cases, and a large number of documented cases, news stories every other day. And this is not scaremongering. This is reality, that large sections of the Muslim communities in the UK genuinely feel concerned about when they speak about ideas, when they engage in conversation, when they make a human mishap or mistake because of fear of criminalization. So we started this work. We were one of the few organizations that spoke about this in 2007, way before anybody ever heard of it. We made it very clear that there's a clear attempt by the UK government to class people into good and bad camps. You're a good Muslim, you're a bad Muslim. You're a bad Muslim, you're a good Muslim. And this dichotomy is not helpful. It's not helpful, and again, it's based on a flawed assumption. We'll probably go into that shortly. But coming back to the most critical thing that we actually worked on Prevent was this particular publication, Cradle to the Grave, the Prevent strategy. How Prevent is now seeping into every single part of your life. You could be referred by your GP, your general practitioner, your doctor. You could be referred by the prison officer. You could be referred by a school teacher, and you could be even referred as a child. And that's the problem. It seeped into this society, and we've basically taken it apart and actually shown why Prevent is flawed, why it's not evidence-based. It's absolute pseudoscience. I can't stress that enough. And the irony is the government shrouds Prevent in secrecy. It refuses to engage in discussion. It refuses to release its evidence. It refuses to release even the training. But yet again, we'll keep on. And as our friend Julian mentioned when he launched the report, is that this is something that is used as a pet project. Let's try it in the Muslim community. Let's see if it works out. But sure enough, sooner or later, we will use terror legislation on every part of section of society who dissents against government or who has political ideals that go against the grain. So we started some efforts. We compiled an extensive signatory of 300 academics, MPs, activists, basically saying that this stifles open debate, free speech, and political dissent, and the government is using the threat of terrorism as a means of taking out people who dissent and who disagree with the government, essentially. And we've been on a real serious concerted effort to get this message out to the country, to speak in communities. I actually remember on a tour when we were going around the country, Blackburn, Sheffield, and other cities, the Daily Mail, the respected publication in the UK. No, it really is, according to some people. They accuse us of scaremongering. You're scaring people, you're making them fearful, you're making them look inwards, you're lying about Prevent. This will never happen to Prevent. It's absolute lies. But the evidence, again, has proved them wrong. And what you're seeing now is that Prevent has now the opposition towards Prevent has become the norm. And when I say the norm, people were very acutely aware of Prevent, but didn't really understand it, didn't really think it will impact them. Well, it's the dark-colored people, it's the people who live in the cities, it's the Muslims. As long as, myself and my family are not impacted well, it's not really a problem. But there you see, that's a lack of solidarity. It's a lack of understanding as to what the true essence of counter legislation, what it tries to achieve. So here what we've done is try to submit. You go through the usual process. Let's find out the information. Let's try and unravel and reveal what Prevent really is. So we submitted something called FOIs, they're Freedom of Information Requests. Now in the UK, you might as well not bother, to be honest. They just sometimes don't reply to you, sometimes they'll even refuse it on all kinds of spurious grounds. So many people, ourselves, academics, journalists, have submitted hundreds, no joke, hundreds of FOIs, Freedom of Information Requests, asking to understand what on earth this strategy is about. And this is actually my favorite of them all. It's a very long reply from the Home Office. But to put it very simply, for those of you who are not reading it, the government has an idea that if we were to divulge the training or the information in regards to Prevent, it will undermine confidence in the community in the strategy, and terrorists themselves will know how to avoid being detected. But the irony is, we speak to any Prevent officer, we speak to the Home Office, they will always say, Prevent is not about spotting terrorists, it's about preventing terrorists, it's about making sure that we stop them from going on this pathway to violence. But again, the pseudoscience, as it says, just contradicts itself again and again and again. So what we said was, we're fed up of waiting around and trying to get you to reveal your information. We just leak it. And we leaked recently, I think it was a month ago, we leaked the most extensive training manuals on Prevent in the history of the strategy. In the first time it's ever happened, you've got all these manuals, the videos, the trainings, all there, public scrutiny. And the Home Office, despite having trained 350,000 people, have refused to divulge it for their concern of it undermining confidence in terrorists being spotted. So that's us taking a proactive action to say our communities will not wait around for government to understand or to come round or to change their mind, and we'll take action if need be. But again, this doesn't come without any consequences. And some of the consequences, like many people before mentioned, are difficult ones. So for example, after our report, Cradle to the Grave, came out, which was a very comprehensive report looking at all spheres of Prevent, our bank accounts were closed on March 2014. So we are operating in the feudal period, we could say, on a cash-based bartering system. And that is still the case today. We actually do not have a bank account. No bank in the United Kingdom will give us a bank account. So we're all dealing with coins and cash as if it's some sort of medieval town. And that's the reality of what happens when you decide to to scrutinize the policies of government, which is a fair act for any democratic, open health society to do so. And again, not only was it good enough for CIJ to have their bank account, but 2 of our staff members have to have their bank accounts closed as well. And they're never allowed to have bank accounts, according to the banks. And even one of our board members had the same thing. And the thing is, they won't even inform you at times. You'll have to find out on your own. There'll be no information. There's no reason as to why. The bank manager may say, oh, I'm very sorry. So, well, I know you're very sorry, but that's not really helpful, is it? So that's the reality of, again, trying to open to scrutiny what the Prevent strategy is. And again, after the bank closure, you had the month prior, our outreach director, Razan Beg, who's a former Guantanamo detainee, he was arrested and held for 8 months on trumped-up charges. And for those of you not aware of what he was arrested for, the idea that you can send a generator to a war-torn country like Syria, when the UK government at the same time had sent 10,000 generators, that was considered a terrorist offence. And the irony was, the day before his trial, he was released suddenly without no information to why, and yet he was held for 8 months in the most high security facility in the UK. Again, that has taken direct action against members of CIJ staff, and that's him there walking out of HMP Belmarsh in southeast London. And since then, he hasn't even got a passport. He's not allowed to travel. They won't even issue him a passport, and he's unable to join you here today or to even take part in important investigation work abroad. And then it wasn't enough for us to have no bank accounts, for our colleagues to be arrested, for our colleagues to not be able to leave the country. But obviously the good people in the tabloids and the right-wing media, for some reasons, pick a bone with CIJ. So you have these sorts of headlines that are produced. And I have to say to the good people at the Daily Mail, the idea that a 6-month investigation about people who are speaking at universities, openly invited by the university themselves or student societies, can be seen as fanatical or can be seen as zealots is laughable. And it actually shows the high quality that the Daily Mail has for itself. And this 6-month investigation really uncovered nothing. There was nothing hateful, there's nothing illegal, there's nothing insightful. All we'll speak about is Prevent. And what the state have done in the UK is very sophisticated. Don't bother, it's not enough for the Prime Minister to label you. We need the press to then start to say, these people are also very dodgy and very controversial. And the problem is, the foreign minister, as well the university minister, the Northern Irish secretary, it's always as if it's a regular thing in the UK now. Everyone's got to say their 2 pence on CIJ. And it's actually quite funny that an organisation with no bank account, whose director is regularly arrested, who can't leave the country, with 4 staff, can get so much attention simply by talking about why is Prevent secret? Why can't we talk about it? Why can't we challenge the ideas? Where's the evidential base? Where's your empiricism? This kind of language is seen to be extreme. And that's the problem. How is it a small organization of 4 people can be so important in the eyes of the Gang of 8? And then you have another group of people. And obviously from a UK context, but also I'm sure in other countries, people generally, there's this understanding or convention that journalists and lawyers should have the right to go about their work without any, sort of, harassment or intimidation or underhanded tactics. And what you're seeing now in the UK is a steady trend of the counterterrorism officers who are now saying to journalists, okay, we'll need to seize your laptops and your materials because we may have some materials used in our investigation. And the problem is, I spoke to the BBC about this actually, and I said to them, well, what's happened here? You seem to have allowed this to happen on your watch. And the problem, and their response is, well, there's nothing we can really do. We can't really report on it. The police have to do their job, and that's the end of it as far as we're concerned. I think that's a problem, where you have institutions like the press who are being attacked by using counter-terrorism legislation, not willing to challenge it. Even the BBC Newsnight itself didn't report it. It had the third-party source, the Independent, speaking about it. And obviously the case of David Miranda as well. Schedule 7, something that many 40,000, 50,000 people a year are stopped at a port for up to 9 hours, and you have none of these rights whatsoever. If you're stopped in the UK going for a port, you're virtually, you're stateless. You have virtually no rights whatsoever. And that is something that happens on a regular basis as well. And now you're seeing that intrusion happening with journalists, with lawyers, who the government don't seem to fancy. And obviously, sometimes we keep a scoreboard as to who's been stopped the most. I can say thank you, I've not been stopped so far, but you never know. But one of our colleagues up to 20 times has been stopped, and that's a problem. And also, I think it's really important to say that, whatever begins with one community will eventually affect this entire society. And our work is to enable our community to gain a voice, to say that you can have dignity, and you can speak out if you think that something is wrong, and you should organize. And again, we come back to this statement again. It's a really pertinent statement, I think, and I think it reflects the direction of travel that we're heading on as well. And finally, one thing I'd like to really end on is that your role. Many of you here have done some phenomenal work, and I genuinely admire the work you've all done in all fields of life. But we can only basically do our job if we can collaborate, if we can team up. And I think there's a practical angle in terms of solidarity where it needs to be extended in a way where it empowers communities like ours to actually exert our voice and to actually hold a power to account. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Although it sounds like the UK misunderstood 1984 as a manual and created the thought crime policy already. Unfortunately, they will not even tell us what the crimes are, so it's going to be tricky.